This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. Hello everyone and welcome back to Basket Case Clubs. I'm Michael Connolly from CPR Group and I will be your host on this journey. And joining me as usual for Basket Casey goodness is Steve Connolly. G'day, Steve.
Hola, hello, how you doing?
Some Spanish, I like that.
Oh, and some Aussie, g'day.
Yes. So as we head into our next 50 episodes with episode 51, it's time to talk about what happens when you want to get out. So we've got a very special episode this time with an interview with Stacey Williamson, whom both you and I have known for many years. Stacey is a great volunteer in sport, a great sports mum, and a really good character. So she's from North Queensland, and we've known Stacey for through our work with BMX over many, many years. And very recently, Stacey had to make the difficult decision to step down as secretary from the Regional Association of BMX up in Far North Queensland.
And it had been a long time, hasn't it, that she's been involved?
A long time that she'd been involved in, as you'll hear, in various roles. But it was that, and this is where it was a really interesting interview, because it was at that moment that she had to just stay her hand and say, quite literally, not put her hand up when nobody else was putting their hand up for the role.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, but what it shows is that there is a way through. So if you are in that situation, or when you get to that situation, make sure that you've got a good plan. So I'm going to let Stacey tell the story, Steve. Let's get into the interview now. Joining me now is the former secretary of the BMX Far North Association in Far North Queensland, Stacey Williamson. Good evening, Stacey. How are you?
Well, thank you, and good evening to you as well.
Thank you very much for joining us on Basket Case Clubs. I'm sure you'll have to go and listen to the whole back catalogue now to make sure that you are truly the best interview that we've ever had.
Absolutely. I have already gone for a little bit of a sticky beak.
Oh, good on you, good on you, good on you. So the purpose of this episode is to talk about Stacey's journey in volunteering and right up to the point of exiting a few weeks ago, and the good and the bad and the ugly and all of the stuff in between. But I'd like to start by going right back to the beginning, Stacey, and talking about when you first became involved in committee volunteering. What did that look like?
All right. So I guess for me, the first time that I went on to a committee was at our local club. So we're obviously members of the Townsville BMX Club. So the kids started BMX, and as always, volunteer resources are really hard in local clubs. You've got a president, secretary, treasurer, those sorts of roles that you need to fill. And obviously you need people that have a little bit of experience in some of those roles to go into them. So I think within quite a short time of joining the club and the kids riding and those sorts of things, it came around to AGM and they were looking for a treasurer. So had a few people speak to me and things like that. And obviously, like, I do finance as a career. So had a lot of exposure with accounting programs and all those sorts of things. And it was quite an easy fit. And so that was my dipping my toes in the water, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, nice. It's interesting when you were talking about that AGM, because some people say, yeah, I made the mistake of going to the AGM.
No, look, I mean, I think volunteering is, it's a big thing. Like I think, I'm very time poor with work. Like I have a flexible employer that lets me do so much, but I'm very time poor. So my husband works away, the kids have school and sports, and I work full time. I don't get to do the school things. I don't get to go and read the books at the school and those sorts of things. So sport and their chosen sports is where I get to give back.
Right. So, and that's because it fits in with the way that your life is structured, that you've got the daytimes full, so you can't do the daytime going and helping out at the tuck shop at school. So then you commit yourself to the volunteer work after hours.
Correct.
So why the kids?
What do you mean?
Why volunteer for the kids? What's so important about kids? It is a leading question, of course.
Absolutely. I suppose for me, it's so that it sets a good role model for my own children. Like, without volunteers, particularly in BMX, without volunteers, the kids would not get on the track. And so I suppose I started to see that, kids weren't getting on the track and it's hard with things, and, racing was getting cancelled because there wasn't officials and those sorts of things. And so that for me was an incentive to be involved. My kids were riding. I wanted them to ride. I wanted to be involved. And so, yeah, like I just wanted them to be able to have the opportunities, and it's, so inclusive with the people that you end up being with, that it's almost like your friendship circle or another family or something like that. And so for me, yeah, I enjoyed it.
Mm. So where did your volunteering journey in BMX take you from there, starting with Club Treasury?
Okay, so I started with the club treasurer's role, and I pretty much stayed in that role with the club because I guess it's probably one of the more harder roles to fill. From there, I went on to become a club level official, and did the stuff to do with all of that. And my volunteering life's taken a pathway with that as well. So I am a state level official. I official at state events, national events, local club days, everything like that. And my children were quite young and sort of weren't eligible straight away for a lot of the other programs and things that were going. But we had BMX Far North Queensland, which was our zone, our squads, our things like that. And as the boys become eligible for those events and we were traveling away to those sorts of things, I was lucky enough to, I suppose you could say, be mentored by another lady, Fiona, up in Cairns. And she had a huge passion for BMX. And so between her and Nicole and a few of the other ladies, I sort of moved away from the club level and into the zone level of volunteering. So I eventually stepped out of my role as treasurer with Townsville Club, and I went into like an events management role with the zone. And then I went into the role of secretary with the zone.
And how long ago was that, do you reckon? Time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. God, you ask the hard questions. I'd say it would have to be at least 4 years now.
Okay. Yep. And it's funny when you say that, often it turns out that it's 40 years,
Yeah. You just aged me dramatically, but that's fantastic. Thank you for that. No, I think it would be about 4 years.
Okay. So in that 4 years, what do you reckon your best experience on the zone committee has been?
I would have to say that my best experience would probably be doing the squad last year with our riders. I think with the transition from BMX Queensland and BMX Australia to Oz Cycling, and very unknowns with the future of BMX Far North Queensland, myself and the rest of the committee put our heart and soul into making what we thought could possibly be the finale, the last time that the association would be going, the last lot of riders to go through a squad. We designed a jersey that was in tribute to the 6 clubs in our zone, and we wanted to go out on a high. If that was going to be the last thing that we could have, we wanted to go out on a high. And that doesn't take it away from any of the other events or dinners or functions or open days that we had. But for me, it would have to be trying to give the riders who had been through the program and the new riders the experience of knowing what it was all about. That's
great. So, and it turns out that wasn't the last hurrah now that the organisation has continued. So before we move on, that's a great experience. What do you reckon was the most challenging time?
definitely the most challenging time has been to fill the roles of the committee this year, to give the opportunity to keep the association alive. So obviously, you know, with the clubs being standalone now, the zone, for want of word, isn't a pathway anymore. It's not a set process where the clubs would report to the zone and the zone would reply to the state, and then the state would, you know, like there was no clear pathway for any of that anymore. So I think that was a challenge, what it would look like in the future, having people that had a vision, that wanted to come on and still see the organisation exist in whatever form it exists in, but to still be an active organisation.
So it sounds like it almost became a real question of relevance of the organisation as a whole.
Correct.
So, all right, let's move on to starting the shift, the transition out. When did you know that it was time for Stacey to move on?
That's a hard question to answer. I don't know if there was ever really a time like this happened, so now I have to do this. I don't think it was anything like that. I think it was just more a natural transition. My work is expanding. We've got more sites, we've got more staff. My workload is increasing. And so to me, my role with BMX FNQ, as much as it was a volunteer role, I took a lot of pride in my work. I wanted to have the time to invest in the role and give the role what the role needed. And I felt that I was starting to lack the time to be able to do that, because I could sit down and spend 3 hours doing volunteer work, or I could smash out some of my papers for work and have less work to do the next day at work. So I don't think that there was any significant, it's time. I think it was just more the fact that I wanted to see a change. I wanted to see some fresh life getting breathed into it. And I think, you know, until people actually step into a role, they don't appreciate how much time and effort it involves.
So it kind of sounds like there's a bit of work getting in the way, life getting in the way, and time for change, but not necessarily one, this is the catalyst, this says got to change. Often it's kids grow up, often it's a shift, you know, people move and then they can't be a volunteer in that area just because of they're not there anymore. But this is not uncommon, is it? That it's just the death by 1,000 cuts, lots of little things that then say, I don't have the time to commit what I believe this role needs anymore.
Absolutely. And even some of the members that were reaching out to me that had the same passion and wanted to see the association continue didn't have the time to give the role that it needed. You know, other people were on other committees, other people had other commitments, some people traveled away for work. And so again, even talking with them about it and what it involved, while it didn't involve a lot, it involved a lot.
It's a really good way to put it. Just those little things, you know, everyone says, oh, this is okay for volunteers to do, and this is okay for volunteers to do. But what they're not seeing is, you know, government agencies and councils, they're just seeing their own little bit. They're not seeing the big pile of paperwork that's falling on these poor volunteers' desks that is getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
That's exactly right. And I suppose to me as well, like I'm still volunteering as an official. So I haven't actually stepped completely out of volunteer roles. I haven't completely stepped out of not volunteering. I've just lightened my load of volunteering.
Yep. Okay, so what happened was that we had an AGM, and the vote was taken that there was enough passion in the room, albeit a digital room, for the 6 clubs that Stacey mentioned to continue the zone. So while 2021 and the state titles and there being what was it? The sea of teal, because of the teal jerseys of the Far North Zone. Yeah, the
sea of teal is definitely what we are known for.
Yep, that beautiful sea of teal, but it turns out that wasn't the last hurrah. There is enough passion and enough drive among the clubs to keep the zone going. We don't yet know what the future looks like, but there's certainly enough passion in the room. So they voted down the potential winding up of the association, but then we couldn't fill all of the committee positions. So we had Stacey and two other of the long-serving volunteers stepped up to say, all right, well, we'll carry this forward. And then we called a special general meeting, and I think it was about 6 weeks' time. And the purpose of that meeting was to elect the committee, so the committee who would then take the zone forward. By the time we got to that SGM, we had somebody nominated for president, we had somebody nominated for treasurer, and we needed a third. We needed a secretary as well. So there was no nominations for secretary. No other nominations had come in. So there was a little bit of a question mark as to what was going to happen at that AGM. At the SGM. So what was going through your mind, Stacey, as we went through the motions? We had the president elected unopposed, the who had nominated, the treasurer elected unopposed, who had nominated, and then it got to secretary and crickets. What was going through your mind at that point?
I can't even begin to put into words how I felt going into that meeting. Such a sea of emotions, torn loyalty, knowing that I needed to step back, but not knowing if I would actually have the willpower when the meeting got to the crunch point, that the words were said, if this role does not fill, the association will close down. I was fielding messages and phone calls up until the actual meeting started. I had a member who was saying, I'm happy to help, but I can't do the main role. Will you do the main role and I'll assist you? I had another member saying, I'd really like to help, but I can't. And so I was in a sea of emotions, because I was like, if it doesn't fill, I can't sit there and let the organisation fold. Like, I'm too loyal and too passionate, and I can't do that. But then the other half of me was going, you can't keep doing it. Somebody else has to do it. And so, yeah, I was really, really perplexed going into the meeting. I'd done so much work. I'd spoken to so many people to try and get the position filled. I had conversations with people trying to move people into different roles, going, well, did you want to do this? And then somebody else could do this. And another one of my mentors, Michelle Darker, actually turned around to me and she said, we really need people to go into it that have the passion and have the time that they can, dedicate to it, to turn it around and to do it all. We don't just want the role filled. And I suppose that was probably really, really hard to hear as well, because I knew that I had the passion, and I knew that, and I was like, oh, somebody just needs to step up and do the role. I think, like behind the scenes, I'm always going to help. Like, whoever it is, they can ring me, they can talk to me. If they are running an event and they need extra help, like I'm always the first one to put my hand up. But I just wanted to step away from the title.
So what was it going to take then to make you comfortable enough to take that step back and not put your hands up when there were crickets?
I think I was comfortable enough when we got a nomination. I don't know. Like, I really don't know, Michael. Like, if we had got to the death knell in the meeting, I don't know if we would be having this conversation now. I don't know if I would have been strong enough to not try to keep it going if that was the only role that had to be filled.
So if it had stayed quiet, you reckon that you would have, you're that type of volunteer that can't not put your hand up?
I think so.
Hmm.
Yeah. So obviously, when I got the text message saying that we had a local member who was willing to go into the role, however, they were unable to attend our meeting, I was like instantly on my phone, get them to text me directly, send me screenshots of the conversation. I need to be able to see that this is a genuine nomination, because again, my whole like, this is your role and this is for the process and this is what needs to happen, to the yay, we've got someone to go into the role. And so I received those messages through as our SGM had started. And I think that was when I felt my first sigh of relief that the organisation would continue. It would continue with different, mentorship. It would continue with, fresh blood and new faces and a new future, and it would be given that opportunity. And that may or may not work out. It may or may not develop into what we think it may, or it may not. But for me, I think it was just such a relief that the role had been filled.
Yep. This might not be a surprise for you, Stacey. I'm going to guess that it's not, given that you've been on enough committees and you've seen enough volunteers to know that the story that you've just told is unfortunately not unique. And there are lots of familial volunteers who will just do it because my family's always done it and they will always stand up. It's I suppose that you've probably seen that in others as well.
Yeah, look, definitely. I mean, obviously, with social media and Facebook in today's day and age, and I watch all the AGMs and I follow a lot of the clubs on Facebook, especially, traveling, for racing and things like that. Yes, it is repeat names that you see coming through from the AGMs or from nominations for things.
So when it's time to move on, and it can be for any of those reasons that we talked about before, what advice do you reckon that you've got for other volunteers? And this, I'm particularly talking about the committee volunteers, because those are the ones that we've got to have a name on a piece of paper to send that off and to have it registered. Otherwise, we can't have a club. But of course, it exists off the track, on the track as well. So out of the boardroom and onto the track, it exists there as well. So sometimes people get to that point where they feel, for want of a better word, trapped in a volunteer role. What advice would you have for them, and not just specifically when you're sitting there wondering if you can hold your hand down and not thrust it up in the air, but even in the preparation for those moments? What advice do you reckon you'd have for those people?
Look, I think within yourself that you may have become a little bit stagnant in your role or a little bit regimented in your role. What you've got on your plate, what your commitments are, how far you can stretch yourself. I suppose for me, as I said previously, like working full time, and Luke works away. So, I wanted that the time when he was home, we could be a family and to have that quality time and not be trying to get a laptop out and not trying to do things and those sorts of things. And I think it takes a cycle of time to actually work out that it's time to step back and have a break and invest in other things, whether it's your work or your family life or whatever it might be. And I think, I don't think it's one thing that happens that make you realize that. I think you actually probably stay in a role a lot longer than you would normally. If it was our work life and it wasn't fulfilling, or if it changed direction or something like that, we'd be on seek, we'd be looking for other jobs, we'd be doing those sorts of things. But as a volunteer, we have a different sense of loyalty that if nobody else does it, we've got to keep doing it. So I don't really know if I can say to anybody what's going to make you realize that you need to move on, because I think there's too many factors for that. And I think that for me, I still want to be involved, and my officiating is the way that I can still be involved in things, but I can't do everything.
Yeah. And if you could, where do you draw the line? But at what point do you say family health first, then family, then work? But it's so amazing that, exactly like you said, there's so much, when it is fulfilling, there's so much fulfillment that we get from our volunteer roles that we put up with the crap for probably longer than we should.
It's exactly right. Absolutely. Like, I mean, you know, even though you're a volunteer, you still have to make hard decisions. And you still have to make decisions that not everybody likes. And yeah, like, and as a volunteer, you sort of, like, people judge you and think, why do you have the right to make that choice? Or why do you, like, whereas if we made those choices in our day-to-day life, it's respected because that's the role you're in and that's what your job is. But in volunteer life, it's harder.
So it sounds like there might be a bit of education that we still need to do there. Still fight the good fight to teach all of the members that this is actually exactly the same as every other aspect of our lives. We shouldn't be treating sport differently than the way that we treat our home lives and our family lives and our work lives.
Oh, look, absolutely. I mean, we've even had discussions at committee level that, clubs need to run as a business. There's profit and losses to look at. There's expenses, there's overheads. You can run every program underneath the sun, but if it's costing the club money and the club isn't making money and it doesn't have money to put back into the members, it's not an efficient business model. So I think that that's another thing as well, is like, people don't realize that it's a business.
Yep. You've just summed up basket case clubs. Well done.
Thank you.
The other thing that's fascinating, though, is that it still came down not to what you knew at that point at the SGM when we needed somebody to be secretary. It still came down to who you knew. So it was still that networking that you've done, that you and the committee have done, and the relationships that you've been able to create as a zone between clubs. That means that you've created, exactly like you said before, it's like another family. And then that there are people there that, so long as their circumstances are right at the time, somebody's going to have you back.
Absolutely. 100%. I suppose, like, there's so many people as well that you want to thank on your journey. So, like, for me, like, first it's Luke and it's the boys, because if they didn't support me being a volunteer, I wouldn't be able to do it. And then it's people like, Fiona Mundy and Michelle Darker and Nicole Green and other people who almost give you that opportunity to join the committee and train you and mentor you. And if I didn't have people out there that were willing to impart the information on to me, I wouldn't have been as good at the role either. So when you start piecing it all together, there's so much more to it than me just being the secretary.
Yeah. And then you're in the same boat to then feel that you almost have an obligation to be the mentor and the support person for the new people coming into the roles.
100%. Like, definitely. Like, and even the lady who has gone into my role has reached out and asked questions and done things, and how would you have done this, or what would you have done with that, or and those sorts of things, or where can I find this information? And it's just like, off the top of your head, you can say, go to this folder, and under that folder you find this, this, and this on the laptop, and that's where the information is.
So has that been hard or easy so far?
I think it's been quite easy so far, because they've literally only sort of had like sort of one meeting, whereas a lot of the stuff that Tennille was doing was just paperwork. So she was looking into the insurance, and she was looking, back through the quotes to, update the constitution and doing the Office of Fair Trading paperwork. So what she's doing at the moment is more clerical than zone.
Yeah. And look, it's interesting because sometimes people don't leave happy. People crack the shits and leave for personal reasons, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But even so, it's so easy for the outgoing secretary, and probably secretary and treasurer mostly, to be able to field those calls and help somebody in a couple of minutes, literally, than have the new person struggle. So even if you crack an Arnie and walk out, it's probably still a good idea to be that sounding board for the incoming people regardless.
Yeah, definitely. Like I don't see any reason in trying to withhold information or having an Arnie about it, because who does it benefit? Like it doesn't benefit anyone, and it certainly doesn't benefit the people that you did the role for the first time around. So no, like I've been really lucky with my handover. That like we actually went out for lunch, we did a handover, we spoke through it all, we went through everything. We had a chat about the history of things, the meetings and stuff that's happened, so that she sort of could come in with knowing the good, the bad and the ugly.
Yep. No, I think it's really important.
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the things that I actually didn't say, is the fact that through their mentorship my passion grew. And so in one respect, you've also got to wonder whether you're letting people down by stepping out of the role, and whether if the organisation fails, whether you failed them as well.
Yeah. It's a tricky one, because at the starting end, it sounds like at the point where you said that they almost let you or invited you, I forget the turn of phrase used, to join the committee. It's like they're placing trust in you. They see something in you that you might not see in yourself.
Correct.
And then at the back end of that, you want to make good on that right to the very end, and you never want to let those people down because they've become so close to you.
And I think that's probably another thing, to be honest, that that's probably another one of the contributing factors, I think, of why I struggled so much with like the question where you kept saying, what if it got to that point? Like, it wasn't just me, it was those other things in the background that were playing a part in that decision.
Yeah. Stacey, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for taking us on that journey. I recognise that it is somewhat an emotional journey for you, and especially now that you're out on the track, and I hope having a wonderful time with your family and your friends in BMX almost every day, if not at least every week.
Thank you. I hope that I answered the questions correctly, or as correctly as I could.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Stacey. I really appreciate your time tonight.
No, thank you so much. All righty.
Thanks, Stacey. See ya.
Bye. Bye.
So there you have it, Steve. Thank you very much again to Stacey Williamson for being such a good sport and providing that great information. And like Stacey said, to just listen to the advice of other people and do what you can when the time is right, when the time is right.
And thanks to Stacey for all of her service to BMX over the many years that she was involved.
Absolutely. She is part of a really great or has been part of a really great and strong team, and the great and strong team up there does continue. So you and I both know so many passionate riders and parents in the sport of BMX right across the state. And it's wonderful to know that it's wonderful for Stacey to know that she's leaving the sport in good hands and she can still be involved. And one of the really important things is that she will be, in that succession planning. It's really important that if you are the one that's leaving, please be around, because a phone call with you after you've gone can quite literally save hours of hunting for things or trying to figure things out. So yeah, definitely stay involved as you can.
I think that speaks nicely, just really quickly, to the point that we often make about volunteer committee members being the short-term custodians of their club or association, and the fact that succession ideally should begin not when you're looking to get out, but when you get in and finding other people that might be suitable to take your role on. but also that really clear recognition that you stick your hand up to do the job for a short period of time, and that you've got, dare I say, maybe even an obligation to leave the organization in a better state for you having been there. And if you can hand over great systems and you can support the next person or people who are taking on your role or roles, and I say that really deliberately because a lot of people over time will, gather more and more jobs under their wings.
Wearing lots of hats.
Wearing lots of hats. So if you take that, adopt that mindset from the outset that you are going to be handing this role over at some stage. So don't just keep everything in your head. Document what should be documented and systemize those procedures that are going to be needing to happen time and time again, so that when the time does come for you to step back, you can hand over to someone and they can continue to do just as good a job as you've been doing.
And you can do that handover with confidence. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And be confident to actually step back as well, knowing that the next person is going to be taking on a well-oiled machine rather than a poisoned chalice.
And there's not one right way to do the job. So other people are going to come in and bring their flair, provide the support, provide the guidance, but also have some openness to there being more than one right way to do a job.
Absolutely.
Which is what I've always kind of thought is a good lesson in management. Steve, thank you very much again for joining me on this episode. Thanks, of course, to Stacey Williamson for the wonderful advice and guidance that she's provided to everyone. Thanks, of course, to Jess for being our wonderful producer and editor as usual, cutting out all of the bad jokes that probably shouldn't have made it there. So well done, Jess. Please keep it up. If you're not already following us on social media, make sure you do there. We're on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram in particular. And of course, you can grab our newsletter at our website, cprgroup.com.au, where you can not only find how to subscribe to our newsletter, but also read all of our previous blogs and find the previous episodes of Basket Case Clubs. So until next time, Steve, thanks again for joining me on Basket Case Clubs, and I look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Adios, amigo.
See ya.